to pronounce that. Getting ready here. Game should start anyway in just a minute or so. So let's follow Kleerkast and see what happens. Kleerkast is the rating favorite by 100 elo points or so, and also I would say he's the clear favorite to take this. But xuanet is a very experienced Crazy House player as well as Kleerkast, so I'm expecting to see a lot of high quality Crazy House in these games. First to 6 wins is through to the next round. Kleerkast is online. And I'll just sit and wait for a little while. So we have a prediction here, 6-3 Kleerkast. And I'll go with 6-4. Do we have anyone watching? Yes, one viewer at least. And of course you can watch this afterwards also if you don't have the time. And still no sign of the guy with the handle that starts with an X. Oh, now he's online, so we should get ready to start the match. Let's get ready to rumble. And xuanet is white in the first game. As you can see, he's ahead by a lot. But I suspect that most of these games are a bit older, maybe. Kleerkast plays a lot of openings, so it's hard to expect what he will play. This is one of the lines he's playing. So this is still theory. C3 is a weakness, and I think maybe white will just ignore the threat and put his king in safety and try to make use of the the initiative. But he's thinking here, strangely enough, because if he takes here, it opens up for the light squared bishop for black. Okay, he goes on the offensive. So this is the usual response, I think. Protecting the g pawn and also preparing to do stuff on the g file. So notice that taking here would be bad, because then you take on d5, and then you can place it on g7 with check, and then you can take on h6, creating all sorts of threats. Already a very sharp position. So that allowed taking on f3 with a check, but after queen takes and rook g8 and bishop takes d5, the knight would land on f6. Hi there, Zaraza. And tjenare Mårten. So a very sharp position. I'm not sure where they deviated from the opening theory. This looks shaky for black, I think. White has a lot of options. The black squares are weak. So this is a natural move, threatening the rook, threatening c3. But it takes a while to pick up the rook. So meanwhile, white just ignores this. Ignores the rook and ignores even taking on c3. So what is the idea for black? For white, sorry. If black takes here, what does white do then? Well, maybe one idea is to put a pawn here, yes. So you try to block the view to the f6 square. But wasn't white supposed to take on d5 first? What happened here? Because if you take and then place the pawn here, oh, I'm not sure. Because this is protecting f6, and if you take, you simply take back with the knight and f6 is still protected. I suppose you can just try to escape with the bishop. But is this dangerous maybe? It takes a while to go and pick up the h7 pawn. I'm not sure what's going on here. This is a nice move. Semi-aggressive, but also covering some important squares. And at some point you might consider simply taking g7. A very sharp position still. Not easy to predict how this game will end. So black decides to get rid of this annoying pawn, but now white has a heavy in hand and can attack the last rank. Kleerkast is very low on time, and I'm not sure about taking the pawn on g7 and giving that white that heavy piece. Okay, so you want to trade rooks here, because then a pawn here is very, very dangerous, threatening rook h1. Both players treading on really thin ice here. And what about, you cannot place a pawn here, or can you? Knight check here? How dangerous is that? Oh, this is actually a safe square. Is it over? Check here with the rook. You place the bishop on g8. So, pawn here. Very difficult to calculate this. So, black spent his rook here. And now white is checking and checking and checking, and this is going to end in mate, I think. Or is it? Only seconds left. So you can take here with check. Yeah, and then it's mate. Oh no, what did he do now? White simply blundered. And it's over. Wasn't there a forced mate there? Am I blind, or? I thought it was a forced mate with bishop takes e6 in the end. This is... You should bring the knight to e5, yeah? But here, bishop takes e6. Gets rid of this bishop. Okay, and then it's a simple mate. Bishop at d7 and take the bishop and take c8. Yeah. And this was just losing. Very hard fought first game, and Kleerkast takes the lead. So they blitzed out a lot of moves. Let's look at it quickly. Kleerkast plays his pet fianchetto d4, d5 line, which he has a lot of experience in. And he demolishes the black king side, giving a piece for 2 pawns. And judging by the passive bishop in the corner, I think this is good for white, actually. Plenty of useful places for those pawns. And this is a concrete defense around the white king. Very hard to touch this. You have such good control of all the squares around here. Hard to place that knight anywhere active. Xuanet is thinking here what to do. Although I have to admit it's not so easy to find a good plan for white either. What do you do here? How do you make use of those pawns? So this splits the black pawns, but you don't have a knight to attack. You certainly don't want to trade the, or do you? And you replace it? Just felt a bit awkward to get rid of the fianchetto bishop. He must be certain he found something really good here. So black's king is really naked after king takes h6 and knight takes f7. So he decides to sacrifice the queen here instead, keeping the f7 pawn, giving some shelter for the king. But the position is more or less equal material-wise. Queen at h6 is a huge threat that Black needs to address. Also there is bishop f5 forking these guys. So for instance, if you play something like pawn at g7, you don't take care of both threats, but this move actually does. It's because it protects h7. So queen at h6, king here, and there is no mate on h7. This is a nice move, followed by bishop g4 probably. Oh, he finds something else. So if Black takes here, either with the pawn or the bishop, White plays queen h6 and then takes here, and the king is completely naked. Threatening pawn h7 or f7, and White's initiative is probably just unstoppable, because if you take, queen takes, you have pawn f7 forking. Black trying to survive. Is there a forced mate? You would need either a heavy or a knight. So notice how White just ignores material. He had a mate on g8. Excellent attacking skills by Kleerkast there. 2-0. And this is slightly different. White makes an early e5 pawn push, so we don't see the pin of the c3 knight. I should say sometimes it's actually best not to develop this bishop, because it protects the g7 square. This looks quite okay for Black. d5 is under fire. Yeah, very clinical. He just pushed forward the whole time and left Black sitting with a lot of pieces in hand and not any time to place them. A couple of really strong attacking moves from Kleerkast. So maybe White is onto something here. d5 is hanging. Not so easy to see how Black should defend here, because you don't want to place the pawn on e6. The pawn on e6 would just obstruct the light square bishop. And now you have to calculate. I suppose you take on d5 with something, yeah. And should Black take on f2? It's not like you want to give two light pieces for a rook and a pawn, but at least the White king has to step forward a little bit. very sharp play by both players. So now black is ready to place a knight on g4. But it's white's move. Maybe white can play pawn e7. I was thinking pawn e7, knight here takes, queen takes. So many options here for both players. If you take with the h-pawn, maybe the knight lands on h3 instead. White decides to take with the queen, but what about knight here? Also, rook at f5 is a possible move. Sometimes. This guy covers f6, which might be good. But now black has to be careful, because something landing here would be annoying. It seems like white has everything under control here. So pawn here, you cannot take on d5 with the queen then. Because queen takes, then you have a mating threat on d8. So this pins sort of the black bishop, and white wants to lure it away to b5 where it's harmless. I'm not sure what that really threatens, because you could just take it, I think. Both the bishop and the rook are protecting g1. So white simply ignored it. Okay, so black takes here, and now if you take here, then rook g1 is decisive. White got the first check, and you have to look out. You cannot step on these two squares, because then the queen is hanging. I would check. And white mustn't stop checking now. He needs to find checks, checks, checks. So this covers the g3 square, so no knight at g3 mate. can black somehow find a safe spot somewhere? What a hero if he does. No, black lost on time, but I have a feeling that the position was lost in the end. Let's have a super quick look. Actually, black could have taken with the queen on d5 here. Okay. So now white is better. Did white find all the best moves? No. Because now king d8 is strong. Black took a free knight. But now everything comes with check. And it's game over. White can even pick up the queen here without risk. Okay, so back to the game. It's 2-1 to Kleerkast. And let's have a brief look at what happened in the opening. So xuanet plays a fianchetto, giving up a piece early. Black doesn't have compensation for this. This is pure speculation and very provocative play by black. White has just played natural moves. So white mustn't just let this go for free. Can black take here? This looks a bit tempting. Yeah. Maybe e5. White needs to make use of his initiative. Maybe h4, trying to open the h file. Or should you try to bring out the knight? Wow. White gives up this. And the idea is, if black takes here, there is knight at e6 check. Pawn takes, and you have queen takes d8. So, but this is still good, isn't it? Knight g5, king here, and knight at e6. Because takes and queen takes, you don't win the queen. But when the rook takes, you have queen at f7. Yeah, Kleerkast finds it. If the rook takes, you have queen at f7. So what do? Do you play bishop a6 or either flourish. You have both h6 and f6 covered. But no, you cannot leave the e6 pawn hanging, sorry. Very tricky position here for black. So he goes for the queen. And what happens here? Queen here, king to h6, queen takes h7. It's not so easy for white to mate actually, because the king is running and the white queen is left on h7. So this was the sensible thing. A crazy and sensible thing for black to do. Be greedy and just take the queen. Because if there is no mating attack for white now, black will be ahead a lot. Has Kleerkast found something? He castles. Okay, so now maybe threatening f4. You have all these pawns, 3 pawns. This knight covers e4. And yeah, f4 is a real threat. I think maybe take king here and take h5. Is that winning? Okay, there wasn't a way out for the black king anyway. Very strong, aggressive play by Kleerkast as white again. So now we see a repetition from the first game, where xuanet had a winning position and blundered. So this is actually theory, I think. I know a little about openings. I think white's idea is to play f3, because if black takes, you can take with the queen. And this should favor white actually. White looks a little bit better. You should probably keep the bishop somehow. You don't want to let black take on c4, then black can place the bishop on d5. Black doesn't have any pieces to place here, so white can play f3, but he can also wait a little bit and start placing his own pieces. Yeah, this is the problem for black in this position. He doesn't have any natural moves. Because the question is the bishop really better on d7 than on c8? I'm not so sure, actually. And this is wise. Start placing your pieces before you open the position. You want as many pieces on the board as possible when the position opens. Okay. I'm already famous. Oh, ananas. So now the f pawn arrives not at f3 but at f4, so it protects the knight on g5. And white would really like to open the f file. Black's king is stuck in the center. You cannot cancel. Actually, it would be mate in 1 if you cancel right away. I think black has some problems here. Yeah, black needs to shut out this queen. Now black is threatening the g5 pawn. So how do you do this? Do you open the position, putting a pawn on f6 maybe? That would leave the 7th rank really weak. Okay, this is obviously a possibility. You cannot take here because, yes, you can take here. Or can you? If you take, can you sacrifice the queen maybe? Queen takes, knight takes, bishop here, take on g6. Or is that too much? Yeah, maybe it's... I'm just hallucinating maybe. The knight covers f7, so you need to do something as white. And indeed he decided to sacrifice the queen. There's an annoying check here on f2 if black gets the chance, and that's probably why white decided to check on a3, just to let white waste his pawn on d6 rather than put it on f2. Now rook f7 is strong, and black only has his queen to place. The knight is hanging. What do you do? Okay, so this protects e4. A rather desperate effort by black here. But he can pick up g6 now. That was clever. It was probably better to place that pawn on f3 instead. So knight here now, you can take on f6. And can you afford to place the rook on e8? It wins the queen, but you're wide open to counterattack with knight e4. Not so easy for white here. Kleerkast was very resourceful when he defended there. So this move brings the knight into play, and also you cover the first rank, but obviously it gives black the chance to place his knight here. And I'm not sure about this. This looks dangerous for white. Okay. White doesn't have Is it going to end in a draw? If you take here, take, and then keep putting heavy pieces on g8. I don't see anything better. Okay, so doesn't white get mated here? I would be very nervous here. Yeah, rook here and simply the smothered mate. Okay, 4-1 to Kleerkast. I think, but I might be wrong. I think there was a perpetual there. So maybe because he was a bit angry here, xuanet, because he blew it, he plays a gambit as black, trying to get an active position. He gives away his e5 pawn just to create some open diags for his bishop and lines for his queen. And white returns the material. Actually taking here and taking with the knight here looks a bit risky for black. Maybe f4 will come. Should you take with the pawn on e5 maybe? I was thinking f4, yeah. And if you go back, maybe pawn d5. Because with the pawn here, sometimes this check is really annoying. If you can get a check here and check with the queen on e2, the white squares are weak. So a little tactical trick by black. If white takes with the queen, you have knight at c3. Taking here, doesn't give white anything, I suppose. So do you maybe move the knight somewhere? But where? Where to? Yeah, he moved to d5. And now, since white put his knight on d5, black decides he can safely return to c6. So I would look at, yeah, bishop b5 followed by queen e2. I think it would have been better to play queen e2 first for white, rather than trading here, because then black would need to block with something on the e file, and I'm not sure if there is a good way to block. Do you block with the knight on e6? It just doesn't look right. But now you can block with the queen. So I'm not sure. If white takes here, you have knight g3. But this just looks crushing because white had a pawn on d7, and now you can you take here? Yeah, you take on e3 first, and then you take on b7, and it's game over. So white is winning this. Nothing to do for black. Threatening knight at c6, threatening to take the rook. And black doesn't have any counterplay. Maybe throw in a little check here. Yeah, okay, with the pawn instead. Now you pick up the rook with a mating threat on e8. Or does he have a forced mate here? He seems to think so. Yes, and queen b5, and it's mate in a couple of moves. Black resigns probably. So knight at e4 is mate. Okay, Kleerkast tricked him. Or I should say xuanet tricked himself in that game. And we see the same line repeated. Now white gives up the pawn, which I think is the right way to go. Yes, and this move. I seem to recall this is theory. Because if you take here and you take on d8, white's king is safer. And obviously Kleerkast has played this before. He just has to make up his mind which line to play, because he knows this is probably a bit unsound for black. But you need to be very precise here with white. Even if maybe the computer is saying +4 or +5, I don't know. You need to find the good moves also. So maybe black can retreat with a knight. Or put a knight on e4. Isn't the bishop just hanging? This seems a bit too much, I think, because now you take the queen, and where is the white attack? Is white even attacking, or is it black who's attacking? Do you really want to open the g file for the rook? So this is the strong move. You can pick up d4 if you want. So you take with the queen, okay. Threatening both bishops. And now you have a pawn in hand that you can place maybe on f3, maybe on e2. And something went wrong for white here. I'm not exactly sure what went wrong, but something went wrong. Because white's attack is far, far away. Attacking f6, but the queen is controlling f6. Even if you take on c3, the queen is still controlling f6. But at least you protect your g7 pawn. And black goes for some passive defense, but maybe it's correct here. You are up a lot on material. You just don't want to give away a heavy for h8. That would spell problems. Now black is ready to take something here. So, do you have time to place the knight on h6? That seemed very slow. Maybe queen g5. Oh, he can just take a rook also. Black is being greedy here. White's attack is so slow. And where do you even find that heavy piece? Now you fork both these light pieces. I think he even missed it. So you can just take on b5. And this is looking disastrous for white. Now h5 is hanging. And soon it's time to resign, I think. So, I'm starting to smell mate here. Do you take with the rook here maybe? Okay, he finds some, yeah. Because now if you place something here, you take it, and then you take with the queen, and you have knight e2 with a mate on the first rank. Now you can just pick up the pieces with check. You can take on e4 if you like. But there's probably a forced mate also. So he takes on e4 just for show. And mate on e2. 6-1, very impressive play by Kleerkast. Xuanet didn't capitalize on his good positions, and it went downhill in the end. Let's take a quick look at this game. Thank you. I don't think black can take on d1, can he? Isn't this supposed to be good for white? Or maybe I'm just not recalling correctly. So maybe this was just good for black the whole time. Knight e1 looked horrible. And black just kept everything under control with a forced mate. I'll show you the other mate with the bishop on g1. You can take here, take queen takes on e1, and then you have a knight for e2. Typical back rank mate that you need to know. Okay, congratulations to Kleerkast, and thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.